Imagine calling 911 for your life, and the very people sworn to protect you turn their backs. In tonight's episode, three racist officers ignore the desperate pleas of a 76-year-old black veteran. Only to discover that karma comes knocking faster than they ever expected. Fire. Have you ever felt let down by those who should have had your back? Drop your story in the comments below. If you believe in justice served, smash that like button, subscribe and share to stand up for the voiceless. Globe showing Europe, Africa. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Let us know so we can see how far this story reaches. Rain lashed the cracked pavement of Elmswood Avenue as 76-year-old Henry Pops Washington hobbled along with his cane, shielding himself with a tattered umbrella. The storm had turned the city streets into rivers, and thunder roared overhead like nature itself was trying to send a warning. His coat soaked through, Pop's frail body trembled, but not from the cold. From fear, clutching a paper bag against his chest, he turned the corner and froze. Across the street, three men in ski masks were breaking into the corner store he owned for over 30 years. His heart skipped. That store, his livelihood, was all he had left after his wife passed. The front windows shattered with a crash. One of the thugs ducked inside with a crowbar. "No, no, please, not again," he whispered. His hand trembled as he fished out a flip phone, barely functioning, and dialed 911. "Yes, I need help, Elmswood and 44th. They're robbing my store." His voice cracked. "Please, I'm an old man, I can't stop them. Please hurry." Dispatch confirmed officers were nearby. Relief bloomed for a moment. Just then, blue and red lights flickered through the rain. A squad car pulled up to the corner, tires splashing water. Officer Kyle Mercer and Officer Dean Reddick sat inside, warm and dry. Henry waved frantically, limping toward them. "There. My store, look, they're in there," he shouted. Mercer lowered the window just a few inches. "Sir, calm down. We'll take care of it. They're inside. They're armed, I think. Please, do something." Mercer sighed. "It's probably just some kids. You should go home before you catch pneumonia." "But my store, my life's in there." Reddick smirked. "Sir, you're making a scene. Do you want us to charge you with obstruction?" "Obstruction?" The word stung like a slap. "I'm asking for help." Mercer rolled up the window. They drove off, laughing. Pop stood stunned, the cold now seeming to crawl into his bones. Inside the store, he heard glass shatter again. They were destroying everything, with no backup, no police, and the rain soaking him down to the soul. He slowly made his way across the street. Despite the danger, he had nothing left to lose. Halfway there, a sudden loud bang erupted from the store. Pops ducked behind a trash can. Gunfire. He tried calling 911 again, but his phone died. Dead battery. Across town, Mercer and Reddick pulled into a donut shop parking lot. Mercer snorted. "Crazy old man. You'd think we're supposed to be superheroes." Reddick laughed. "He probably voted for us to get defunded. Let him deal with it himself." They stayed there, warm and smug, unaware that back at the store, one of the masked men had just fired a warning shot and kicked open the back door. Inside the shadows of a nearby alley, someone else watched it all unfold. Drenched in a black hoodie, former Army Ranger Marlon Briggs had been watching the robbery unfold. He had been walking home from his night shift as a hospital security guard when he saw the old man begging the cops for help, and saw them leave. He took a breath, assessing the threat. 3 of them. One visibly armed. Pops was in danger. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a collapsible baton and a small flashlight. He wasn't a cop, but he wasn't going to let this slide. Meanwhile, inside the store, the masked men were trashing everything. Cereal boxes, candy shelves, and coolers exploded under crowbars and kicks. "Grab the cash drawer," one shouted. "This is all garbage," another said. "Ain't nothin' here." Pops entered quietly through the back, stepping over glass. He held his cane tight. "Get out. This is my store. Just leave." One thug turned. "What you gonna do, old man? Call the cops?" The others laughed. He stood his ground. "This place fed my family. You don't belong here." They moved toward him, menace in their walk. Before the first could grab him, a loud thud echoed. The lead man dropped to the ground, clutching his leg. Marlon had struck him with the baton. chaos erupted. One thug swung his crowbar, but Marlon dodged and disarmed him with a twist. Pops ducked behind the counter, trembling. "You picked the wrong night." Marlon growled, tackling the second man into a shelf. The third thug bolted for the door, right as a loud voice rang out, "Freeze! Hands in the air!" Mercer and Reddick had returned, not because of the robbery, but because their supervisor had radioed a second complaint from a bystander. Now, they arrived to see a store in ruins, one man bleeding, another unconscious, and a third restrained by zip ties. Mercer drew his weapon. "What the hell's going on?" Marlon raised his hands. "These three were robbing the store. I stopped them. The owner called for help. You ignored him." Pops slowly rose. "I begged you." Reddick looked annoyed. "Put the weapon down," he ordered Marlon. "It's a baton." "I stopped the robbery," Marlon said. Placing it on the ground, Pops added, "This man saved my life." Mercer exchanged glances with Reddick. Suddenly, they both looked nervous. Back at the precinct, word was starting to travel. Not just about the robbery, but about what Mercer and Reddick had done. Or failed to do. And someone else had caught it all on video. A teenager across the street had been filming the whole encounter from his bedroom window. The footage showed Pops waving frantically, the officers ignoring him, laughing, and driving away. It was already making rounds on social media. Pops had no idea. He only knew his store was a war zone. The only people who helped him weren't wearing badges. As paramedics arrived for the injured suspects and supervisors started demanding answers. Mercer felt something crawling up his spine. Something he hadn't felt in years, a fear. T.O.B. continued, "Would you like me to move on to Generation 2? Avenue?" As 76-year-old Henry Pops Washington hobbled along with his cane, shielding himself with a tattered umbrella. The storm had turned the city streets into rivers, and thunder roared overhead like nature itself was trying to send a warning. His coat soaked through, Pop's frail body trembled, but not from the cold. From fear, clutching a paper bag against his chest, he turned the corner and froze. Across the street, three men in ski masks were breaking into the corner store he owned for over 30 years. His heart skipped. That store, his livelihood, was all he had left after his wife passed. The front windows shattered with a crash. One of the thugs ducked inside with a crowbar. "No, no, please, not again," he whispered. His hand trembled as he fished out a flip phone, barely functioning, and dialed 911. "Yes, I need help, Elmswood and 44th. They're robbing my store." His voice cracked. "Please, I'm an old man, I can't stop them. Please hurry." Dispatch confirmed officers were nearby. Relief bloomed for a moment. Just then, blue and red lights flickered through the rain. A squad car pulled up to the corner, tires splashing water. Officer Kyle Mercer and Officer Dean Reddick sat inside, warm and dry. Henry waved frantically, limping toward them. "There. My store, look, they're in there." He shouted. Mercer lowered the window just a few inches. "Sir, calm down. We'll take care of it. They're inside. They're armed, I think. Please, do something." Mercer sighed. "It's probably just some kids. You should go home before you catch pneumonia." "But my store, my life's in there." Reddick smirked. "Sir, you're making a scene. Do you want us to charge you with obstruction?" "Obstruction?" The word stung like a slap. "I'm asking for help." Mercer rolled up the window. They drove off, laughing. Pop stood stunned, the cold now seeming to crawl into his bones. Inside the store, he heard glass shatter again. They were destroying everything, with no backup, no police, and the rain soaking him down to the soul. He slowly made his way across the street, despite the danger. He had nothing left to lose. Halfway there, a sudden loud bang erupted from the store. Pops ducked behind a trash can. Gunfire. He tried calling 911 again, but his phone died. Dead battery. Across town, Mercer and Reddick pulled into a donut shop parking lot. Mercer snorted. "Crazy old man. You'd think we're supposed to be superheroes." Reddick laughed. "He probably voted for us to get defunded. Let him deal with it himself." They stayed there, warm and smug, unaware that back at the store, one of the masked men had just fired a warning shot and kicked open the back door. Inside the shadows of a nearby alley, someone else watched it all unfold. Drenched in a black hoodie, former Army Ranger Marlon Briggs had been watching the robbery unfold. He had been walking home from his night shift as a hospital security guard when he saw the old man begging the cops for help, and saw them leave. He took a breath, assessing the threat. 3 of them. One visibly armed. Pops was in danger. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a collapsible baton and a small flashlight. He wasn't a cop, but he wasn't going to let this slide. Meanwhile, inside the store, the masked men were trashing everything. Cereal boxes, candy shelves, and coolers exploded under crowbars and kicks. Grab the cash drawer, one shouted. This is all garbage, another said. Ain't nothin' here. Pops entered quietly through the back, stepping over glass. He held his cane tight. Get out. This is my store. Just leave. One thug turned. What you gonna do, old man? Call the cops? The others laughed. He stood his ground. This place. Dawn broke gray and heavy over Elmswood Avenue, the night's rain leaving puddles that gleamed like fractured mirrors in the early light. Henry Pops Washington sat on the rickety wooden steps of his battered storefront, bundled in an old blanket, watching paramedics load the last suspect into an ambulance. His legs ached from sitting so still, but his heart thudded with restless emotion, relief, gratitude, for Marlon Briggs, and a simmering anger toward the officers who had turned their backs on him. A crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, neighbors in rain-soaked coats, local reporters with steaming coffee cups, and curious onlookers clutching their phones. Whispers rippled through them like a gathering storm. At the center stood Marlon, still gripping his baton, eyes alert and scanning the scene. He'd refused offers to go to the hospital for minor bruises, insisting his priority was Pops, and ensuring these officers faced consequences. Across the street, police cruisers idled with engines off. A second squad car arrived, lights flashing silently. From it stepped Lieutenant Sandra Kim of Internal Affairs, her blazer crisp despite the damp. She carried a tablet and moved with purposeful grace. Mercer and Reddick, in uniform but lacking swagger, stood near the squad's open doors. Their faces were pale and drawn. Lieutenant Kim raised a hand. Officer Mercer, Reddick, please come over. Her tone brooked no refusal. Mercer swallowed. Reddick shifted uncomfortably. Pops watched as the 2 officers approached. Reddick's eyes darted to Marlon, then to the gathering crowd. Mercer offered a stiff salute. Kim nodded curtly. You 2 refused service to a citizen in immediate danger last night, Kim began quietly. This is a formal IA inquiry. You're both under investigation for dereliction of duty. She tapped her tablet. Anything you say can and will be used in departmental proceedings. Mercer's jaw clenched. Lieutenant, we were investigating another call. Kim cut him off. That call was cancelled when you chose to ignore Mr. Washington's plea. Your 911 units confirmed no in-progress calls elsewhere. Her gaze flicked to the detained suspects. Now, we have videos, eyewitness accounts, and your own statements contradicting your report. You'll both be suspended pending the outcome. A murmur rose among the crowd. Mercer's face drained of color, Reddick's mouth twitched with resentment. Neither had expected IA to arrive so swiftly, as the officers were led away in handcuffs, mere administrative cuffs, but humiliating all the same. The gathered neighbors cheered softly, their empathy palpable. Pops rose unsteadily, leaning on his cane. Marlon approached, placing a gentle hand on the old man's shoulder. You okay, sir? Marlon asked. Pops exhaled, relief and adrenaline mingling. Yes. Thank you, son. You saved me. His voice cracked. Around them, cameras clicked, and reporters jotted down notes. Marlon nodded. I couldn't stand by. His eyes shifted back to Mercer being escorted. They'll think twice before ignoring another plea. A reporter from the local TV station hustled forward, microphone in hand. Mr. Washington, can you tell us what happened last night? She asked, lens trained on him. Pop squared his shoulders, summoning his dignity. I called for help. They left me. But this man, he nodded to Marlon, he answered my call. I'm grateful. The reporter turned to Marlon. And you, sir, why intervene? Marlon glanced at Pops, then back at the cameras. It was the right thing to do. He paused. When someone's life is in danger, color doesn't matter. We all deserve help. That statement hung in the crisp morning air, and the crowd broke into scattered applause. The TV crew panned the assembled neighbors, many nodding in agreement. Miles away, that evening, the viral clip of Pops waving futilely at Mercer and Reddick, and then Marlon's intervention, topped local trending. Thousands had already shared it, hashtag Elmswood Hero, hashtag Pops deserved better, hashtag Justice for Henry. Later that morning, at the precinct's IA office, Mercer and Reddick sat side by side before a board with printed screenshots from the teenagers' footage. Mercer's uniform was crisp, but his sleeve trembled. Reddick's tie was askew, his face reddened. Lieutenant Kim addressed them sternly. "These images show you ignoring a citizen in distress," she said, tapping a freeze frame of Pops waving. "You then parked at a donut shop. That's unacceptable." She moved to another image, Marlon striking the first thug. "You can justify your initiative if you like, but departmental policy prohibits such vigilante action." Mercer's eyes flicked to Reddick. Reddick's lips twitched. "Ma'am," Mercer murmured. No excuses," Kim cut in. "Your actions, or inaction, will determine whether you face formal charges under department regulations. You're both suspended without pay." In the hallway outside, a local pastor, Reverend Clara Thompson, WPC, Women's Police Coalition, advocate, and community organizer, listened to the precinct's security guard recount the scene. She pressed him for details, her expression grim. "We need full transparency," she said firmly into her phone. "If they're going to abuse power, we'll bring it to light." That evening, Pops and Marlon sat on the stoop of the boarded-up store. A neighbor had loaned them hot cider from a thermos. Pops sipped gratefully, watching Marlon scroll through the viral video on his phone. "I never expected so much support," Pops admitted. "I feel seen." He winced. "But I also worry. Will this catch back on me? Will I face backlash?" Marlon shook his head. "No. People rallied around you because they recognize injustice. Now, they want change." He tapped the screen. "Look, your GoFundMe to repair the store has reached $2,000 in just a few hours." Pop's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted my life's work to matter." "It still does," Marlon said. "And this is just the beginning." As they talked, across town, Mercer and Reddick left the precinct under escort, their uniforms replaced with civilian clothes. Reporters shouted questions, but both officers lowered their heads and walked away. Behind them, the precinct doors closed, marking the start of their fall from grace. Meanwhile, community activists organized a stand with Pop's vigil outside City Hall. Reverend Thompson led chants demanding police accountability. Signs bearing Pop's smiling face dotted the crowd. "No more ignored cries, protect our elders, police for the people." When Pops and Marlon arrived, escorted in a borrowed car, they were greeted as heroes. Pop's cane tapped against the pavement as he took the microphone. "Thank you," he began, voice strong. "Last night I was ignored. Tonight, I am heard." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Reverend Thompson joined him. "This is how change starts," she said. "When we stand together to demand justice for the most vulnerable among us." Under the glare of floodlights and camera bulbs, Pops raised his cane skyward. "Let no one ever ignore us again." The crowd cheered, voices echoing off City Hall's stone facade. Back at the precinct, Lieutenant Kim prepared her report for the chief. "The community response is overwhelming," she noted. "They demand swift action. We cannot fail them." She paused, exhaling. "We will proceed with full disciplinary measures. This is a turning point." As night deepened, Pops and Marlon departed the vigil, exhaustion tugging at their limbs. They climbed into the car, the hush of victory mingled with unresolved questions. Would the store be rebuilt? Would Mercer and Reddick face true justice? Would the police department change? Pops looked at Marlon. "Thank you." Again. His gratitude was quiet but profound. Marlon smiled. "We did the right thing." He started the car and turned onto the empty street. Behind them, in the darkened windows of the corner store, shadows shifted. Remnants of last night's thieves, still cuffed inside, watched the pair depart. Their stranded look mirrored the officers, powerless, exposed, awaiting the next move. Dawn still hid behind heavy clouds when the phone on Marlon Briggs's kitchen counter buzzed. He'd spent hours poring over store repair estimates alongside Pops, but now a new crisis demanded his attention. On the other end, a strained voice, Detective Olivia Serrano, one of the few fair-minded officers in the precinct, whispered, "Marlon, there's been an incident. Mercer's under arrest for assault last night. Reddick's gone missing." Her word sent a jolt through him. "How? Where?" Marlon asked, heart thudding. "Details are sketchy. Witnesses say a dark sedan pulled up behind Mercer's cruiser around midnight. Two masked figures dragged him out. They beat him, then dumped him on 5th Street. He's in surgery." Olivia paused. "And Reddick's phone pinged near an abandoned warehouse. I'm heading there now. I wanted you to know." Marlon hung up, mind racing. He shared the news with Pops over steaming coffee. The old man's face tightened with concern. "They both ignored me," he murmured, "but violence. I don't condone that." Marlon offered a reassuring nod. "I don't either. But someone's sending a message: those who abuse power risk worse than suspension." Across town, Detective Serrano's patrol car rolled up to the warehouse on Spring Avenue. Yellow police tape fluttered in the dawn breeze. Inside, broken crates and splintered wood littered the dusty floor. The stench of gasoline hung in the air. She drew her weapon, signaling two uniformed officers to follow. "Stay sharp," she warned. Footsteps echoed as they advanced. Suddenly, a muffled groan came from behind a stack of boxes. Serrano crouched, sweeping her flashlight over a battered form. "Officer Dean Reddick, bruised and soaked with sweat, hands bound with zip ties, detective." Reddick rasped. His voice trembled with relief. "Thank God." One officer cut the ties while Serrano scanned the shadows. "Any idea who did this?" she asked, helping him to his feet. Reddick shook his head, fear in his eyes. "No. I pulled over to call 911. Two men jumped me. They said I deserved it, for ignoring old Washington." His gaze flicked toward the open doorway. As if expecting them to reappear, outside, Marlon and Pops drove toward the precinct, determined to offer whatever help they could. When their car pulled up beside Detective Serrano's cruiser, Marlon jumped out. "Detective Serrano, I heard about Mercer and Reddick. What happened?" Serrano looked relieved to see him. "We're investigating," she replied. "We have no solid leads yet. But it looks like vigilante justice. Someone took matters into their own hands." She sighed. "Now we have 2 officers hospitalized and a missing suspect. This could spiral." Pop stepped forward, cane tapping lightly. "Detective, I'm grateful for your honesty. But I fear this will be used to justify more aggression against people like me and Marlon." His voice trembled with worry. "Please. Protect the vulnerable." Serrano nodded gravely. "That's why I wanted you here. We'll need your statements. And Marlon, if you have any suspicions." Marlon exchanged a look with Pops, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "I trust your investigation." Later that morning, at precinct headquarters, Chief Arnold Prescott convened an emergency meeting. Captains, detectives, and the department's PR officer gathered around a polished table. The mood was grim. Prescott cleared his throat. "We face an image crisis," he began. 2 of our officers attacked, 1 missing, after allegations of racism and dereliction. This is fueling public outrage." He stared at Sergeant Alvarez, head of Internal Affairs. "We need answers, fast." Alvarez frowned. "Detective Serrano is interviewing witnesses. We've reviewed security footage, masked assailants, gloves, no license plates. It's professional." Deputy Chief Martinez leaned forward. "Someone here is taking violent action. Is this retaliation by a criminal gang? Or is it someone stirred by the viral video?" Prescott ran a hand through his hair. "Doesn't matter. We must quash vigilantism. Our officers must be safe. I want citywide patrols increased, community outreach amplified. We can't let Pop's story overshadow our efforts to maintain order." At that moment, the PR officer, Jenkins, tapped at his tablet. "Sir. Social media is alight. Support for Washington and Briggs is overwhelming. Hashtag Protect Pops is trending. Meanwhile, calls for defunding and protests are intensifying." A murmur swept the room. Prescott slammed his fist on the table. Then we'll show we're listening. Issue a public apology for the initial neglect. Announce cultural sensitivity training. But also condemn any unauthorized violence. A tense silence followed. Then Alvarez cleared his throat. Sir, if I may, there's been chatter among some officers about teaching a lesson. We may need to look internally. Prescott's jaw clenched. Do it. But discreetly. We cannot let this blow up further. Meanwhile, outside. Marlon and Pops returned to the battered store. Its door was boarded, windows covered. They met the contractor arriving to start repairs. The hulking man, arms crossed, eyed them warily. Mr. Washington, he said gruffly. We can start the demolition today, but I need cleared permits. Pops nodded. I'll have them by noon. Then he glanced at Marlon. Thank you again for everything. Marlon smiled. Let's get this place back on its feet. Inside, they reviewed the contractor's estimate: new windows, fresh shelving, electrical rewiring, costly but essential. Marlon scribbled notes. We'll keep fundraising. And maybe hold a community rally here once it's ready. Suddenly, Marlon's phone beeped. A new video uploaded by the teenager from across the street. It showed Mercer and Reddick actually laughing in their cruiser, replayed frame by frame. Comments poured in: anger, disgust, disbelief. Marlon forwarded it to Detective Serrano. Later that afternoon, Serrano watched the clip at headquarters. Her jaw set. She knew her chief wanted calm, but she also believed in real accountability. She fired off a report to IA, detailing her recommendation: both officers be permanently reassigned and charged with misdemeanors for neglect. As evening approached, Marlon and Pops attended the first community council meeting about police reform. Held in the cramped church hall where Reverend Thompson preached. It was packed: local activists, families with children, seniors in wheelchairs, reporters. The air thrummed with emotion. Reverend Thompson stood at the podium. Tonight, we stand united for justice. We demand that those who ignored and abused our citizens be held responsible, she intoned. Applause rippled through the crowd. When it was Pop's turn, he rose slowly, leaning on his cane. Last week, I thought my life's work meant nothing. I was ignored by those sworn to protect. But then, he paused as Marlon and Serrano joined him in solidarity. I found hope in unlikely heroes. Cheers erupted. Camera flashes lit his face. He looked out at the sea of expectant eyes. We must ensure no one else suffers for lack of help. We must rebuild trust, not only in this store, but in the community itself. A murmur of agreement filled the hall. Then a young man in the back shouted, what about Mercer and Reddick? Shouldn't they face jail time? Some nodded, others hesitated. Pops raised a hand. Justice must be fair. I don't wish harm, but accountability. He glanced at Serrano. I trust you to seek it. Serrano stood, microphone in hand. We will pursue truth and justice. Violence is never the answer, but neither is indifference. As they left the meeting, hands clasped in unity, Marlon and Pops felt a sense of momentum building. Yet they both sensed the calm was fragile. The threat of further retaliation, by outraged citizens or desperate officers, hovered in the night air. Outside, police cruisers passed with lights off, silent guardians or silent watchers. Somewhere in the darkness, masked figures still lurked, untethered by law or conscience, and as Elmswood slumbered under the watchful street lamps, one thing was certain: the fight for justice had surged to a new level, where every action, official or vigilante, would echo across the city. Rain pelted the cracked sidewalks of Elmswood as thunder rolled low across the sky like a warning. The city felt heavier now, like it was holding its breath. Marlon Briggs stood behind the counter of the slowly rebuilding store, eyes locked on the community board taped to the window. Dozens of handwritten notes, flowers, and photos had transformed it into a shrine of resilience. Pops Washington sat quietly nearby, flipping through a scrapbook of news clippings that documented their ordeal. They tried to ignore me like I was invisible, he said softly. But now the whole world sees. Marlon looked up, brow furrowed. Yeah, but not everyone's happy about that. He wasn't wrong. Across town, a storm brewed inside the walls of the precinct. Officers sat shoulder to shoulder at roll call, whispers thick in the air. The locker room chatter had turned toxic. Some officers viewed Mercer and Reddick as disgraced examples of failed leadership, but others, especially those with decades of unchecked power, felt cornered, exposed. Sergeant Colin Tate slammed his locker shut, jaw tight. Two of our own jumped and dumped like garbage, and we're just letting it ride? He hissed to Officer Burke. Where's the damn brotherhood? Burke shrugged nervously. Chiefs walking on eggshells. IAs breathing down our necks. Serrano's getting too bold. Tate narrowed his eyes. Then maybe it's time someone reminded her this ain't a courtroom, it's a war zone. Meanwhile, Detective Olivia Serrano worked late, her desk lit by the dim glow of a desk lamp. She pored over files on Mercer and Reddick, piecing together patterns, numerous complaints over the years, all buried or dismissed. She had a growing suspicion that they were just the tip of the iceberg. She scrolled through body cam footage, freezing on a frame where Reddick laughed as Pops bled. Her jaw clenched. How many times have you done this and gotten away with it? She muttered. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. You're digging too deep, a distorted voice warned. Back off or join them in the ER. The line went dead. She stood, heart racing, quickly checking the hallway. Empty. But as she locked her files in her drawer, she caught a glimpse of a silhouette outside her window. It vanished into the rain. Back at Pop's store, the community gathered for the grand reopening. The cracked windows had been replaced with reinforced glass. The once scattered aisles now stood tall with neatly stocked shelves. Reverend Thompson stood at the front, microphone in hand, smiling brightly. We're not just opening a store, she declared, we're reopening hope. The crowd erupted into applause as Pop stepped forward. His hands trembled slightly as he took the mic. When I asked for help, they looked away. But today. He looked around. Y'all looked toward me. A teenager in the crowd called out, "You're our hero, Pops." The crowd cheered again, but the celebration was interrupted by the distant screech of tires. A black SUV rolled slowly by, its tinted windows lowered just enough for eyes to peer out. Marlon's stomach tightened. He recognized the Elmswood PD sticker on the back bumper. Serrano, who had come to show support, leaned in close. That's Tate's ride. He's sending a message. Marlon's hands balled into fists. Then let's send one back. That night, while the city slept under the rhythm of falling rain, an anonymous video dropped online, leaked footage from inside the precinct. It showed Sergeant Tate mocking Pop's pleas. Reddick calling him just another old fool, and Mercer ordering lunch mid-response. The footage went viral in hours. By morning, Elmswood was a powder keg. City Hall called an emergency press conference. Chief Prescott, red-eyed and stiff, stepped up to the podium. Effective immediately, Sergeant Tate is suspended. An internal probe is underway. He held up his hands as reporters shouted questions. This department does not condone racism. We are committed to transparency. But the crowd outside wasn't buying it. Too late. Someone yelled, "Where was the compassion when Pops was bleeding?" The chants began, "Justice. Now. Justice. Now." Inside the precinct, tension snapped. Officers whispered about resignations. Others grew bolder in their resentment. Serrano's desk was defaced, rats scrawled across her nameplate. Still, she pressed forward, piecing together a larger conspiracy of ignored complaints, falsified reports, and a code of silence that ran decades deep. By midweek, Elmswood boiled over. During a peaceful vigil outside City Hall, tear gas was suddenly fired into the crowd. Screams echoed. Children cried. Pops, shielded by Marlon and Reverend Thompson, stumbled as panic erupted. Marlon hoisted him up. "We gotta move." They ducked behind a car as chaos swirled. Pops coughed violently, tears streaming down his face. "Why?" He choked. "Why now?" Reverend Thompson pressed a wet rag to his mouth. "Because they're afraid, Pops. You've become a symbol they can't erase." Suddenly, gunshots rang out, not from the police, but from unknown assailants perched on a nearby rooftop. They weren't aiming to kill, just to scatter. It worked, people screamed. Police drew weapons. And somewhere in the confusion, Sergeant Tate vanished from the scene. That same night, a masked group stormed the precinct's east wing, disabling the security system and painting a single word across the wall in red spray paint, "Karma." In the following hours, panic gripped the department. Detectives scrambled for leads. Officers guarded their homes. Serrano slept with her service weapon on the nightstand. Marlon, too, began watching the shadows more carefully. Still, Pops remained resolute. "We didn't ask for war," he told the local news. "We asked for help. They refused. What comes next?" He shook his head. "That's not in my hands anymore." Across Elmswood, the once quiet corners of the city simmered with defiance, justice, fear, and fury. The lines between protector and predator blurred with each passing hour, and for those who had once stood above the law, thinking themselves untouchable, the hourglass had flipped. A week had passed since the explosive vigil outside City Hall, and Elmswood's atmosphere crackled like live wires. Henry Pops Washington awoke each morning to the steady drip of rain from the patched roof of his apartment above the store. Every drop felt like a heartbeat, reminding him that he was still alive, and that his world had changed forever. He shuffled to the window, peering down at the street below where police cruisers idled with engines off, officers exchanging furtive glances. Some wore expressions of shame, others, barely concealed contempt. Downstairs, the storefront bustled with volunteers stocking shelves. Fresh paint gleamed on the walls, and new LED lights banished the gloom. Pops rose on shaky legs, leaning on his cane. At the counter, Marlon Briggs checked inventory lists. He looked up and offered a reassuring smile. "Ready for today's council hearing?" he asked, nodding toward a stack of folders labeled Elmswood Reform Coalition. Pops nodded gravely. "I'm ready. But I'm not sure they're ready for us." His voice was low but firm. The coalition would present plans for mandatory cultural awareness training, a new civilian review board, and strengthened whistleblower protections. It was his vision of a safer, more just community. Marlon folded his arms. "They'll have to listen this time. The mayor's office can't ignore thousands of signatures, viral videos, and a Supreme Court lawsuit brewing." He tapped the files. "Plus, we have Detective Serrano on our side." At that moment, a black SUV rolled up, tires splashing the curb. The tinted windows made it impossible to see inside. Marlon's jaw tightened. "Not them again." Pop studied the vehicle. "Is it Tate?" Marlon nodded. "And whoever's backing him." He moved toward the door. "Stay inside. I'll handle this." Pops hesitated. "No, we face this together." Marlon opened the door. The rain rushed in like a live thing. Two figures emerged, one in a tailored trench coat, the other in a hoodie zipped tight. They advanced without speaking. Marlon placed a protective hand on Pop's arm. The trench-coated man nodded at Marlon. "We need that paperwork." His tone was polite but brittle. "The coalition files." Marlon's eyes narrowed. "We're not turning over anything until after the hearing, under subpoena." The coat's owner smirked. "The mayor's office has other plans. Hand them over, or you'll regret it." Marlon squared his shoulders. "Go ahead, try." The trench-coated figure signaled. The hoodie stepped forward, raising a gloved hand. Marlon reacted instantly. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it behind his back. A crack echoed. The stranger stumbled, releasing an envelope sealed with a black wax stamp. "You'll need this," the coat said, producing a second stack of envelopes. "Inside, evidence you'll need to clear your names." His eyes flicked to Pops. "And a warning, trust no one." They turned and re-entered the SUV, which sped off into the gray morning. Marlon stared at the envelopes. "This changes everything." Pops gripped his cane. "We serve justice ourselves." Marlon frowned. "We need legal counsel and backup. These could implicate the mayor's office or other corrupt officials." He ripped open one envelope. Inside was a USB drive labeled Tate Company, transcripts, logs. Marlon's breath caught. This could be the smoking gun. They moved into a back office. Marlon plugged the drive into his laptop. Lines of text scrolled, internal emails, audio logs from cruisers where officers joked about teaching the old fool a lesson. Budget memos showing off-the-books payments to Kane Security, a private firm tied to City Hall. As Marlon scrolled, Pop sank into a chair, stunned. "These aren't your everyday bribes," Marlon whispered. "This is systematic cover-up." Pop's eyes blurred with tears. "They used my life as leverage." His voice cracked. I never imagined it so deep. Marlon closed the laptop gently. We'll take this to Detective Serrano. She'll know how to handle it. He looked at Pops. You're going to testify, sir. Pops lifted his head. I always will. Meanwhile, at precinct headquarters, Detective Olivia Serrano stared at the second stack of envelopes dropped anonymously that morning. Her captain frowned. This came with no return address. You sure you want to open them? She nodded. This might expose a citywide corruption ring. We can't ignore it. She inserted a USB drive into her desktop. The files matched Marlon's. She frowned. Judging by the timestamps, these logs go back months, long before Pop's case. She printed copies, her phone rang. Captain Prescott's stern voice crackled. Serrano, we heard about the leak. Destroy those files. She drew in a sharp breath. Sir, we owe the public transparency. These files could exonerate victims and indict perpetrators. She slammed the phone down. Across town, Sergeant Colin Tate brooded in his apartment. Walls plastered with news clippings, hexagrams of red string connecting pictures of Pops, Marlon, Serrano, and political insiders. His fist slammed the wall board. They think they can outsmart me. He grabbed his phone, dialing, make the call. He rasped to the person on the other end, a man known only as Councilman Hayes. If Washington goes to that hearing tomorrow with this evidence, you and I are finished. Hayes's voice was silky. Don't worry, Sergeant. I have plans that will make everyone forget about Washington's crusade. A distraction so big they'll all look away. Tate exhaled. Good. I'll be ready. Back at the storefront, Marlon and Pops closed up for the day. Volunteer workers waved goodbye. The electric lights glowed warmly in the dusk. Marlon pocketed the USB drives. Tomorrow changes the game. Pops leaned on his cane. They want a distraction. Marlon nodded. Then we stay focused. He glanced at the darkening sky. Get some rest tonight. We'll meet Serrano at 7. Hearings at 9. He offered his arm. Come on, Chief. Pops smiled wanly. Lead the way, Sergeant. As they stepped into the rain, headlights swept the street. In a black SUV across the road, the trench-coated man observed, his eyes cold. Next to him, Councilman Hayes spoke into his phone. The show begins at dawn. Elmswood's storm-soaked streets glistened with promise and peril. Tomorrow. The lines would be drawn in public. When the hearing convened, the entire city would watch. And the evidence, fresh, damning, and unstoppable, would topple more than a few careers, but in the shadows, powerful men prepared to unleash chaos. The vigilantes of justice and the architects of conspiracy stood at the threshold. The final act had not yet begun. A pale dawn seeped through the storm clouds as Elmswood awoke to the promise of confrontation. Henry Pops Washington sat at his battered kitchen table, cane leaning against the peeling wallpaper, and stared into a chipped mug of strong coffee. He'd barely slept, the weight of tomorrow's hearing pressed on his mind. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a ticking clock. He traced the scar on his knuckles from the night of the robbery-turned-rescue and whispered a silent vow, no more silence. Upstairs, Marlon Briggs paced in his cramped apartment, the envelopes from the mysterious trench-coated messenger still spread across his desk. He had studied each file under the yellow lamp's glare until his eyes burned. The files revealed clandestine budgets, off-the-record meetings, and audio logs of officers gloating about ignoring vulnerable citizens. One set implicated Councilman Hayes directly in cover-up schemes. Marlon flicked open his phone and reread Detective Serrano's message. Meet at precinct parking lot at 7 a.m. Bring evidence. Stay alert. By 6:15 a.m., Pops and Marlon were cruising down Elmswood Avenue in Marlon's black Dodge Charger, windows down despite the lingering drizzle. The scent of wet asphalt mingled with freshly baked pastries wafting from the corner bakery. Pops pointed at the boarded storefront across the street, their store, still under reconstruction. Volunteers were already setting up tables for a community breakfast intended to rally support before the hearing. They believed in hope, Pops thought. Marlon parked beneath a flickering lamppost, and the two stepped into the brisk air. The volunteers, a diverse group of school teachers, local business owners, and church youth, greeted them with mugs of steaming cocoa and heartfelt nods. Reverend Thompson emerged from the crowd, umbrella in hand. "Henry," she said softly, placing her hand over his. "We're with you." Pops nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes despite fatigue. The volunteers layered a platform with petition signatures, printed headshots of Mercer and Reddick's out-of-court laughter, and a large banner reading, "Elmswood demands accountability." As they arranged flowers and tinted glass jars holding candles, Marlon checked the time. 7 a.m. Time to meet Detective Serrano. They drove across town to the precinct's rear parking lot, where Serrano waited by a marked cruiser. She stood tall in plain clothes, trench coat buttoned tight against the drizzle, and held a thick binder of printed documents. "Glad you made it," she said. "We have to move fast." Behind her, a CNN satellite truck and reporters gathered, hungry for statements. Serrano glanced nervously at the news crews. "We'll make our statement at the hearing," she said, "but first, this." She handed Marlon the binder. Inside were photos of council meeting minutes, hand-annotated memos revealing directives to ignore certain 911 calls, including Henry's plea, and surveillance stills of Councilman Hayes meeting with Sergeant Tate in a dimly lit office. Evidence of conspiracy. Marlon flipped through the pages, jaw clenched. "This changes everything," he murmured. "We need to deliver this to the mayor's office minutes before the hearing." Serrano nodded. "I've arranged a secure courier route. But we must split up. You take this to City Hall. I'll head to the courthouse to ensure the hearing isn't sabotaged." They separated. Marlon tucked the binder under his arm and climbed into Pop's battered sedan, a loaner from a neighbor. Pops hesitated, then climbed in beside him. "You're coming," Marlon insisted. "They might try something at City Hall." Meanwhile, Detective Serrano slipped through the precinct's back exit, hood up, blending into the early morning flurry of officers arriving for duty. Inside, she briefed a handful of trusted sergeants, instructing them to secure the courthouse perimeter and monitor for any spike in traffic or suspicious behavior. She detailed how certain officers had been complicit in ignoring Henry's plea and instructed the sergeants to escort those individuals to separate holding rooms during the hearing. No more unchecked power. By 8:15 a.m., Pops and Marlon arrived at the grand stone entrance of City Hall, its Doric columns gleaming with rain. Dozens of demonstrators had already gathered, holding signs, "Stop protecting racism, serve and protect everyone, and where was your badge?" The crowd swelled in organized clusters, chanting quietly. Marlon climbed the steps with Pops, binder in hand. They spotted Councilman Hayes exiting through the side doors, flanked by aides. Hayes paused at the top of the stairs, a forced smile plastered on his face as he raised his umbrella. Marlon confronted him. "Councilman Hayes," he said, voice echoing across the plaza. "Mind if we have a moment?" Hayes's smile tightened. "Not now," he replied, attempting to pass. Pops interjected, voice loud and steady, "We have evidence you tried to cover up my emergency call, and countless others. We demand answers." Hayes's eyes flicked to the binder. Panic flashed for an instant before he scowled. "You're meddling in politics," he spat. "You'll regret this." He brushed past them and disappeared inside. Marlon exchanged a glance with Pops. "He knows," he said quietly. "And he's scared." They rushed inside, binder clutched tightly. A young aide met them in the lobby and led them to the mayor's office. The mayor, flanked by legal counsel and aides, looked ashen. "Mr. Washington, Mr. Briggs," he said, hands raised in faux calm. "What brings you here so early?" Marlon laid the binder on the desk. "Truth," he said simply. "These files. We need a public acknowledgement and immediate release of any council record suppressing emergency calls." The mayor glanced at his counsel, who shook his head. "This is a breach of confidentiality," the lawyer said, raising his voice. "You can't, it's privileged." Pops leaned forward, voice firm despite his age. "My life was on the line. No privilege can hide that." Silence fell, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic. The mayor's shoulders slumped. "We need time to review." "Time?" Marlon interrupted. "People are suffering now." A tense moment stretched. Finally, the mayor exhaled, defeated. "Fine. We'll issue a statement acknowledging the findings and forward them to the council." "Happy?" Pops nodded. "This is a start." Meanwhile, Detective Serrano arrived at the courthouse entrance. Media vans lined the curb, throngs of protesters filled the sidewalk, and uniformed officers formed barricades. Behind them, plainclothes detectives scanned the crowd. Every eye felt like a potential threat. Serrano slipped inside, heart pounding with resolve. Inside the marble foyer, a clerk guided her to a side chamber where other internal affairs officers prepared to execute sealed warrants on Mercer, Reddick, and Tate, orders Serrano had personally delivered. In the hallway, Councilman Hayes barged in, flanked by security guards. He lunged at Serrano. "This is your fault," he yelled. Serrano raised a calm hand. "This is the law." She pressed a button on her radio. Two IA agents stepped forward, cuffing Hayes. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and official misconduct," she informed him. He glared before being led away, screaming into the corridor. As the clock struck 9 a.m., the main courtroom doors swung open. Judges, attorneys, and community leaders took their seats. Sergeant Briggs and other witnesses gathered along the wall. Pop settled into the witness chair, cane resting against the bench. Marlon and Serrano stood at either side, the binder of evidence between them like a shield. A hush fell. The gavel came down. And at that moment, every eye in the gallery and every ear tuned into the microphones braced for the first words of testimony that would lay bare Elmwood's reckoning. The grand courtroom of Elmwood's Justice Center felt smaller this morning under the weight of anticipation. Rows of spectators pressed against the wooden benches, community activists in bright shirts, reporters clutching voice recorders, and neighbors clutching protest signs they'd folded neatly before entering. At the front, Judge Marlene DeWitt, chosen for her reputation for impartiality, sat reclined behind her desk, fingers steepled and eyes sharp as she surveyed the packed gallery. A long table to her right held uniformed internal affairs agents and their counsel. To her left sat a cluster of city attorneys flanked by representatives of the Police Officers Union. Henry Pops Washington and Marlon Briggs stood at a side table with Detective Olivia Serrano and a pile of exhibits, binders, USB drives, and printed frames from that viral video. The air felt charged, as though every heartbeat might shatter the fragile order. The hearing began with the soft strike of the gavel. Judge DeWitt's voice rang out, "We convene today to address serious allegations of misconduct, racism, and negligence against officers Mercer and Reddick, and the complicity of certain city officials. The public's trust demands the truth." She glanced at a court clerk. "Prosecution, your opening statement." City Attorney Dana Moreland rose, smoothing her jacket. "Your Honor, members of the public, today we present a sequence of events that began when Mr. Washington, a 76-year-old veteran and lifelong resident, called 911 for help during an armed break-in. Officers Mercer and Reddick ignored his pleas. Instead of immediate intervention, they dismissed him, evidenced by audio recordings, dashcam footage, and eyewitness testimony. The results were near catastrophic. Not only was Mr. Washington placed in mortal danger, but the community's faith in law enforcement has suffered irreparable harm. We will show that this negligence was neither isolated nor excusable, it was symptomatic of deeper, systemic bias." She paused, letting her words settle like stones in the silent room. "At the hearing's conclusion, we will ask this court to impose the maximum disciplinary penalties and refer these offenses for criminal investigation." Next, Detective Serrano took the stand. Her crisp uniform contrasted with her gentle demeanor, but when she spoke, her voice carried steel. On the night of March 14, she began, at approximately 9:02 p.m., Mr. Washington dialed 911. The transmission clearly identified the address and nature of the emergency. "I personally retrieved dispatcher logs and cross-referenced them against cruiser GPS data. Officers Mercer and Reddick were less than 1 mile from the location yet failed to respond. Within minutes, the suspects brandished a weapon, and Mr. Washington's life was endangered. Only the intervention of Mr. Briggs, a civilian, prevented further violence." She laid out Exhibit A, printouts of the 9/11 log. "This is not a case of being overwhelmed, this is a choice to ignore." Murmurs rippled through the gallery as her words echoed in the hush. City Attorney Moreland then played the viral video on a large screen. The hall darkened, and every eye fixed on the grainy footage of Mercer and Reddick laughing in their cruiser as Pops waved frantically in the rain. When the lights flicked on again, the reaction was instantaneous: gasps, whispered curses, footsteps shuffling. A mother clutched her child, a pensioner crossed himself. The contrast between the callous officers and the desperate old man had never been more stark. At counsel's nod, Serrano pointed to a freeze frame. Here, the window is rolled up to ignore the request for help. This is visual proof of intent. The defense team rose for cross-examination. Lead counsel Roger Whitfield approached Serrano. "Detective," he said, voice silky, "is it not true that calls in progress sometimes overflow dispatch capacity? That officers, under stress, may misinterpret urgency?" Serrano's gaze was unflinching. "Officer reports show no other emergencies in progress within that time frame," she replied. "Moreover, the officers were on duty and marked available. They chose diversion over duty." Whitfield pressed further, but each attempt to cast doubt was met with Serrano's precise facts and unwavering calm, forcing the union attorneys to exchange uneasy glances. After Serrano withdrew, Marlon Briggs took the stand. The room fell quiet as the former Army Ranger settled into the witness chair. He recounted his return from a night shift and his decision to intervene. "I did not want violence," he said, voice steady but tinged with emotion. "But when a man's life is at risk, we are all responsible. Those officers took an oath. I took action." At counsel's request, he demonstrated the exact angle from which he struck the first assailant, explaining how his training compelled him to protect the vulnerable. Several jurors, citizens chosen from the community, leaned forward, nodding in sympathy. Midway through the hearing, the doors burst open and Councilman Hayes himself strode in, flanked by aides and bodyguards. He wore an expression of cold fury. Spectators gasped. Security officers moved to intercept him, but Judge DeWitt raised a hand. "Councilman Hayes, you may approach the bench." Hayes halted, pressing a hand to his chest. "Your Honor," he began, voice trembling with indignation, "I demand to know why this hearing implicates me. I have done nothing wrong." Moreland produced Exhibit D, emails from Hayes instructing certain officers to prioritize resources away from lower priority calls and minutes from a clandestine meeting at which he suggested ignoring nuisance calls from undesirable residents. Hayes's face paled as the room erupted in shouts. Judge DeWitt pounded her gavel. "Order. Councilman, your alleged involvement will be examined within this proceeding." The tension ratcheted up. Union attorneys rose to challenge the authenticity of the emails, demanding forensic verification. Judge DeWitt granted a brief recess for authentication. Yet the gallery buzzed with speculation. If Hayes's hand reached into police operations, how deep did the corruption run? Activists whispered fervently, journalists prepared new leads, and Mr. Washington, supported by Marlon and Serrano, remained poised, a symbol of dignity amid chaos. Beyond the immediate drama, Detective Serrano presented a final witness, Internal Affairs Chief Alvarez. He summarized the ongoing disciplinary process. Not only Mercer and Reddick, but also Sergeant Tate and several mid-level supervisors faced charges of dereliction, conspiracy, and racially motivated negligence. The scale of the investigation had expanded beyond one precinct to involve oversight by state authorities. Alvarez's calm recitation of each charge sent ripples through the courtroom. The costs of ignoring pleas for help would be quantified in legal terms, and those costs were staggering. As the afternoon's testimony ended, Judge DeWitt cleared her throat. Her expression was grave yet determined. "This court will reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow to review authenticated evidence, assess counsel arguments, and issue preliminary findings on culpability. Until then, I admonish all parties to maintain decorum and refrain from public comment that might prejudice further proceedings." She banged the gavel once more. Court is adjourned. A frenzy erupted as reporters flooded counsel tables. Community members clustered to discuss next steps, and the officers' union lawyers leaned in heated debate. Outside, demonstrators surged against the courthouse doors, chanting, "Accountability now." Pops, Marlon, and Detective Serrano stepped onto the courthouse steps, facing the roaring crowd. Pops raised his cane for silence. "Tomorrow," he called, voice echoing across the plaza, "we will hear the truth. We have seen inaction and indifference. Tomorrow, we demand justice." The crowd cheered. Under the gathering dusk, beneath the flicker of streetlights, the specter of retribution and the promise of reform coexisted in uneasy balance. In the shadows, those whose power had been challenged prepared to strike back, through legal maneuvering or more clandestine tactics. But for now, the people of Elmswood stood united, their voices a chorus rising against the darkness of institutional neglect. The next morning, the steps of the Elmswood Justice Center were blanketed in early fog. Still, Crowds had gathered by dawn, banners in hand, their voices murmuring with expectation. Inside the courthouse, there was no room left to stand. The final day of the hearing had come, and tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to crack the sky. Judge Marlene DeWitt entered with her usual stern grace, but even her eyes betrayed the weight of what was about to unfold. The gavel slammed. This court is now in session. From the very first moment, it was clear the prosecution had something explosive. City Attorney Moreland stood, her lips tight with determination. "Your Honor," she began. Overnight, forensic investigators authenticated the email correspondence from Councilman Hayes. They also uncovered audio recordings from within the precinct, conversations between Officers Mercer, Reddick, and Sergeant Tate that confirmed their conscious decision to ignore Mr. Washington's call based on his race and perceived neighborhood status. The screen behind her lit up with video from the precinct's locker room. The jury watched, horrified, as Mercer chuckled on the footage, saying, "Why should I risk my life for some old black guy? Let him call his grandkids." Reddick laughed, adding, "If we keep answering every broke-ass call from that street, we'll never go home." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Pop sat still, shoulders square, but a single tear rolled down his cheek. Serrano leaned forward in her seat, fists clenched. Marlon gritted his teeth, ready for anything. Moreland turned to the judge. "We are now filing a motion for immediate arrest and removal of Officers Mercer, Reddick, and Sergeant Tate. We are also requesting that Councilman Hayes be remanded to federal authorities for obstruction of justice and abuse of power." Councilman Hayes shot to his feet. "This is a circus," he bellowed. "I'm an elected official. You people are destroying careers over one incident." Judge DeWitt raised her hand, calm but commanding. "You will be silent." Security stepped forward. But Hayes kept shouting. "These people don't understand what real danger is. That neighborhood's been a dump for years. I gave orders to clean it up." Serrano stood suddenly, voice ringing across the room. "You gave orders to ignore citizens in need. That's not leadership. That's cowardice." Judge DeWitt struck her gavel. "Enough. Bailiffs, remove Councilman Hayes from this courtroom immediately." The courtroom erupted as officers cuffed Hayes and began walking him out. The cameras snapped. Protesters outside began cheering as the news broke in real time. But inside, the real reckoning had only just begun. Moreland approached the bench again. "Your Honor, we ask the court to hear from Mr. Washington before the final ruling." Pop stood slowly. He moved toward the center of the courtroom, leaning on his cane. His voice was raspy, but clear. "I wasn't just ignored," he said. "I was told my life didn't matter. But today, I stand before you all, not just for me, but for every person who's ever been brushed aside, left alone, or forgotten because of how they look, where they live, or how old they are." He turned to the judge. "This isn't just about crooked cops. It's about a system that told those cops they'd be safe doing wrong. That has to end." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the buzz of the cameras recording every word. Judge DeWitt took a deep breath and looked at the file in front of her. "After reviewing all evidence, this court finds Officers Mercer and Reddick guilty of gross misconduct, racial negligence, and criminal endangerment. Sergeant Tate is found guilty of willful complicity. All three are hereby stripped of their badges and remanded into custody pending trial." She paused. "As for Councilman Hayes, this court officially refers his case to the U.S. Attorney's Office with recommendation for federal prosecution." The courtroom exploded in noise, cheers, claps, cries of relief. The officers, stunned, stood frozen until marshals grabbed them by the arms. As they were escorted out, Reddick muttered, "You're gonna regret this," to no one in particular. Judge DeWitt rose. "Let this hearing serve as a reminder, justice delayed is not always justice denied." Outside, the crowd surged as the handcuffed officers and Hayes were loaded into waiting vans. Reporters swarmed. Pop stepped to the top of the steps, flanked by Marlon and Detective Serrano. A young journalist asked him, "Mr. Washington, what do you want people to remember most about today?" He smiled, small and proud. That even an old man with a cane can still make noise when the world refuses to listen. Cameras flashed. Applause thundered. And for the first time in a long while, Elmswood saw justice not as a distant dream, but as something real, alive in the voices of the people, in the courage of a few. and in the fall of those who once believed they were untouchable. That was the riveting tale of an elderly man ignored by racist police, only to watch karma catch up in the most unexpected way. If this story moved you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share so we can keep bringing you the most powerful true-to-life dramas. Speech Balloon, don't forget to tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Pop's shoes? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video, where justice always finds its way.